Good evening, everyone. My name is Christina, and I'm with Atlantic Institute. And tonight we have our January first dialogue event in January, and it's a dialogue discussion on a TED discussion on common ground. I chose to lead the conversation because I was taught a lot growing up about meeting people at common ground to build relationships. And for the first 22, 23 years of my life, I always was very focused on finding common ground. And then I took some relationship classes through my employer, and we were taught to not ever go to common ground. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, I'm having to relearn my whole life because my whole life I was taught to go to find common ground. And so now teaching myself to not find any common ground and to just kind of get in the other person's world was a whole different experience for me. So I liked this conversation, and it is political oriented kind of conversation, but I just like the philosophies that the speaker has. So I just thought it was kind of like a very interesting conversation for us to have and consider. Before we start, I'm going to share my screen for most of this and play the video and everything, but I'm going to go ahead and start off with playing the Atlantic Institute video because it's been a little while since I played it. I think July and Tour of Faiths, I had like 14 different tours, and I watched it like 10 times, and I was kind of, okay, I think we've all seen it. We're done. I can't do this again. But I just thought, let me go ahead and try. New year, new scenario. So let me go ahead and do it the right way. So I'm going to go ahead and share and play the Atlantic Institute video as long as I know I've got the right one here. Yes, I do. And so here we go.
The Atlantic Institute is a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting harmonious coexistence between peoples of various cultures, faiths, and backgrounds. We seek this goal through peaceful dialogue, education initiatives, and community organization. Our dialogue events bring together experts, community and faith leaders, and knowledge seekers to address social issues that affect us all. We feel dialogue is the most important element in peaceful coexistence, so we try and maintain several panel discussions, TED Talk events, and book clubs throughout the year. These events touch on social issues, race relations, and cultural understanding, and are a mainstay of our programming. The Atlantic Institute's education events are extremely important to our mission of understanding. We want to promote socially forward critical thinking to students of all ages. To that end, we have developed programs that seek to grow the creative spirit of students and help them think about their communities and the world around them. Our Future Leaders of Dialogue event brings together nominated elite students to learn from each other as well as political and business leaders. Our art and essay contest gives students a theme about important societal issues and allows them to create wonderful works of art and writing while steering their minds towards improving their world. We're always seeking ways to educate youths and adults in order to make a peaceful world for all of us. Our community events are designed to transform neighbors into friends and groups of people into a community. By associating with other nonprofits or by our own initiative, we are always trying to discover new avenues to improve our neighborhoods, places of worship, and community centers. We host cooking demonstrations of food from other cultures, work with various nonprofits to help elevate the work of others, and try to find a way to make the lives disenfranchised or marginalized better. Building a more peaceful world starts in our backyards, so we are dedicated to improving our communities and associations. The Atlantic Institute is always seeking like-minded volunteers and collaborators. If you would like to learn more, find volunteer opportunities, or just want to chat with our staff, please visit our website at www.atlanticinstitutesc.org or follow us on Facebook. We will never run out of fun, educational, peaceful events, so come join us to help make this world a better place full of understanding and unity.
I always like that.
You booked a sunny Verbo.
I always enjoy that bit at the end with the kids all on the Peace Center sign. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go over here to where we have our video at. And everybody heard that other one okay, correct? Okay. So I'm going to go to where the video is here, and I'm going to go ahead and play this, and we're going to go ahead and listen to this. I would encourage you, so what the goal is for us to listen to something from a different perspective, and then to kind of have any conversation about what you thought of or what came up for you, or what kind of struck you from the conversation, or what you think, how that you think that could be applied today, or anything like that. So if you want to take notes, I can encourage you to go ahead and take some notes if you like, but I'm going to go ahead and get this going.
In 1994, the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act passed. You probably know it as the Crime Bill. It was a terrible law. It ushered in an era of mass incarceration that allowed mandatory minimums, 3 strikes laws, the expansion of the death penalty. It was terrible, but it passed with bipartisan support. GOP House Speaker Newt Gingrich, architect of the Republican Revolution, led the way. Signed into law by Democratic President Bill Clinton. Also in 1994, I was a senior in high school when this bill got passed, and you were likely to find me on the streets protesting any number of causes, including the crime bill. So that's what makes this picture all the more surprising. Newt was not on the top of my favorite person in this country list, but this picture was taken in 2015. This was the start of a movement that would pass a bill called the First Step Act. The New York Times called it the most significant reform in criminal justice in a generation. 1994, Nisha, on the streets, activists might be disappointed in this photo. Some of you might be too. But standing here today, I'm not. This is what I'm here to talk to you about today. This is radical common ground. And I'm not talking about the kind of common ground where, we can talk about how much we love springtime or puppies are super cute. And it's not, compromise common ground. This is common ground that's hard. It hurts. It's the type of common ground where you will be ridiculed and judged. But it's the type of common ground that can secure human freedom. It can save lives. And it's the type of common ground I was born to find. It's in my DNA. My dad was born during the partition in India. After the Indian independence movement, the country was really divided between people who wanted to keep the country together and those who wanted different independent nations. And when the British left, they just decided to draw a line, the partition, and make a new country. This started the largest mass migration, forced mass migration in human history. 15 million people trapped on the wrong side of these new borders. 2 million people dead during the partition. And my dad was the youngest baby in a Hindu family on the wrong side of the border. And like families all around the border, on both sides, they went into hiding. And I was told when I was little about the story of my family in hiding. And one day, when armed men came into the house that they were hiding in, searching for families, my dad started crying. And my grandma started shaking him. And my grandfather, in that moment, he made the choice that he'd sacrifice his son in order to save the family. But luckily, in that moment, he stopped crying. My grandma, she shook him and he stopped crying. And I'm here today because he stopped crying. But I'm also here today because of that Muslim family that took us in. They also were held at gunpoint. And an armed man asked if they were hiding anyone. And they swore on the Quran that nobody was in that house. They chose in that moment when the entire country, everybody in the region, you could hate people who had different politics than you, different religion. You could kill people. That was what was happening. But they swore on their holy book. They chose the shared humanity over politics of that day, and we lived, and we survived. And I start with this story because often people tell me that my mission for Common Ground is the weak position. But I ask, how is that Muslim family's actions weak? because of them, my dad did grow up healthy in India, and he immigrated to this country. And I was born here in the late 70s. And like most first-generation kids, I was born to build bridges. I was a bridge between the old country and the new. And just growing up, that's what I did. I was a brown girl in the black and white South in Atlanta, Georgia. I was, like, on one hand, the perfect Indian daughter, straight A's, captain of the debate team. But on the other hand, I was also this radical feminist, punk rock activist, sneaking out of the house for concerts and, getting arrested, like, all the time for causes. I was a mix of a lot of things. But they all live harmoniously in me. Building bridges is just natural. And I think all of us represent a mix of a bunch of things. I think we have that ability to find the common ground. But that's not how I was living my life at all. I moved to the Bay Area in 2001, and this was kind of a turning point for me. It was the start of the Second Iraq War. And I was organizing with a bunch of activists, of course, and we were thinking that probably we needed to expand our circle a little bit. That we weren't going to successfully stop the war if, just amongst us. So we decided we'd build bridges, expand our circle. And so the great anarchist versus communist soccer tournament of 2001 was born. That's it. That's how large my circle was allowed to expand. Building bridges with liberal Democrats? Oh, no way. That was a bridge too far. Local electeds? That was a bridge too far. And that was in 2001. And I think you'll agree with me now, in 2020, it's gotten even worse. That division, that tribalism, we won't sit down at dinner with people who voted differently than us. We see a mean tweet from our best friend, a tweet that doesn't fit with our worldview, and all of a sudden they're canceled. The purity politics of the moment, gone. I sometimes wake up, I don't know what we're gonna do. And people will ask me, how do we do that? But I know about common ground. I feel like we can build those bridges. But it's not easy. I have a concept that I go back to, and it's a concept that should be familiar to everybody since the beginning of human history. It's the idea of the commons. This shared place in the center of town square, the quad, but it's the place where you come together, your community, and you can listen to people on soapboxes with different ideas, and you can be very different, but you come together because together we're stronger than being apart. And today when I think of the commons, I think I extend it to kind of the resources we all share, collectively owned, like the air we breathe. I think of schools, parks. I think of the intelligence we share. We can share in libraries or the internet. And I think the internet's important. In this digital age, that shared humanity, that access to be together in the commons is at our fingertips. But we're not using it that way. We're not coming together. To choose that path towards the commons and to be with each other, you also have to choose love. That's a hard thing. But I know you can't go to the town square filled with hate for the town. You can't lead a people you don't love. You can't lead a country you don't love. And I don't think you can change the world and say, I'm only going to change it for the people just like me, my own circle of friends, not for the people I hate, not for them. It doesn't work. It's a terrible strategy. It doesn't work. But that's what we keep doing. I see it every single day. These silos are just getting stronger. And, your corner of the internet, like Instagram or Twitter, we're just in an echo chamber talking to each other. So I can be really comfortable in my Berkeley Democratic Socialist Commons and talk to all of you. And my dad can be in his bootstrappy immigrant Republican Commons, and I can watch MSNBC, and he can watch Fox News. And we will not know the same things. We won't have the same, we won't live in the same world. We may never know each other or be with each other again. And I don't want to keep going down that path. And I know we can get back to a better path. I know we can find our way to the commons. And I know that because I had a front row, first-hand look at the ability to do it and do it on a large scale. And so I want to get you back to the First Step Act and criminal justice reform. I interviewed for a job with Van Jones about 7 years ago. And he's been a mentor and my boss, and he's actually an inspiration behind a lot of this in this speech. And he told me that we were going to pass bipartisan criminal justice reform. And I laughed because I thought that was an oxymoron. I was in the streets go figure, at the Republican National Convention in 2000 in Philadelphia, and we were protesting the criminal justice system. And there were no Republicans on the streets with me at that protest. I remembered the crime bill. I lived through the tough on crime era. I didn't see it. But he saw it and he walked me through it. He saw me and people like him on the left, who it's always been an issue of dignity and justice. That this system has been racist since the start and discriminating against poor people and people of color. And it's an issue of justice and dignity. So there we were. But he also saw something different from our colleagues on the right. The fiscal conservatives, they had an economic incentive to do it. They saw a system that cost the taxpayers a whole lot of money and was getting terrible results, and it wasn't making the communities any safer. The libertarian right, who believe in less government, saw an expansion of government control, an expansion of the police state. Mass incarceration is like antithetical to who they are. And the religious right, second chances, redemption. These are values that they hold dear, and the criminal justice system can't see those anywhere. And so there was common ground to be had. And that's what we set out to do. And under the leadership of the formerly incarcerated folks who've been leading this forever, we built this bipartisan coalition to pass criminal justice reform. 87 senators voted in favor of the First Step Act. And yeah, President Trump signed it. And because we were able to do that, because we were able to kind of look at that shared humanity, get over our distaste for working across the aisle, 20,000 people have been impacted in just the last year. 7,000 home who would not have been home. 17,000 years of human freedom restored just in the last year. Yeah. And Republicans and Democrats in this election cycle, almost all of them are running on platforms of criminal justice reform. They are trying to bring this bigger, stronger, bolder, and more reforms everywhere they are. That wasn't possible during the tough on crime era. But I also look at this. These are the people coming home. In my office, we get a video like this almost every day. Thousands of people coming home. And when people tell me that common ground is the weak position, or that my love for the people, or my belief in our shared humanity is naive, or that if I work with folks across the aisle, that I'm somehow getting taken advantage of, I just look at this. I look at the people. I say that to the folks coming home. Say that to those 2.2 million people that are still behind bars. And so now, our challenge is to make this possible across a whole bunch of other issues too. Human rights, immigration, all sorts of things, healthcare, mental health. I think there's common ground to be had, but it's not easy. If you want change in a large scale, you need large movements. And that means our circles have to be bigger. And it's not easy being a lefty working across the aisle. I certainly get my fair share of hate mail, but I think that that's exactly the radical approach we need right now. And so this is Jenny Kim. She is someone who is dead serious about second chance hiring. She wants to make sure that formerly incarcerated folks have a pathway to jobs and that businesses make it an amazing place for folks to work. She's also the Deputy General Counsel at Koch Industries, K-O-C-H, Koch. But she's an amazing organizer, and I'm proud to work with her on this issue. And an issue I care deeply about, and probably a lot of you do too, climate, which seems divisive. Seems like there's no common ground to be had there. I think there is. Trump's own Department of Defense this year released a report saying that all future wars were going to be wars about resources, wars about climate. And so, yeah, I want to find partnership with the military. And I used to be the national director, national organizer for the War Resisters League, the oldest pacifist organization in the country. But if there's common ground to be had there, yeah, I'll partner with them. It's not easy. The approach means we need to find love. We need to get back to that shared humanity and that commons. But I know this love, it doesn't just get us through Thanksgiving dinner. It's the kind of love that secures freedom, changes the world. But to do that, I have to step into my courage. And I want all of you to step into your courage. Just like that Muslim family stepped into their courage from my Hindu family all those years ago. I think we can do it. But it's a little bit uncomfortable. If you are who I know you to be, someone who cares about change and progress and wants to see something change in the world, you probably want to know how, but you're also a little bit uncomfortable about me standing up here and celebrating these pictures with Newt and Coke and talking about partnerships with the military. I want you to feel those feelings. I feel them too. I don't enter into these partnerships lightly at all. My entire trajectory of who I am has made me think that it's not even possible. But I know it is. That feeling, that discomfort, that's preceded every major breakthrough in human history ever. That's that feeling that comes before a moonshot. And so I want to make you even a little more uncomfortable. I want you to think about an issue that you care deeply about, something that you want to see changed on a national or global scale. Think big. What would resolution look like? On a large scale, what would it look like to solve that problem? And can you get there with just your circle of friends? I know you can't. The anarchist communist soccer tournament isn't going to help bring about that change. So I want to think about how can we expand that circle a little more? Where is there common ground to be found? Can you think of any unlikely allies, strange partners? Further than that, who's in your way? Who's stopping you from finding that common ground? And is there room for them in that circle? I think there is. I think we have to be able to find it at this scale. And it means that we're going to have to step into that courage and include people, hold our vision so strong, know that justice and freedom is so important that we're able to include more people. Love the people who might not love us back. And so I want to ask you, who's your Newt? Who's your Coke? Who's the military in your story? And I want you to choose that common ground. Thank you.
There we go. All right, here we all are. Let me turn this off over here. And then I was still on. All right, and back to Zoom. All right, well, welcome everybody. I know some of you guys joined us a little bit late. Hopefully you all got to hear that conversation. I was actually thinking while we were in that video that this room, I will say, is kind of like the Commons. You know, I was thinking like all of us in here kind of make up the Commons. We all have different backgrounds. We all have different views and points of views of things. And I was thinking like, it's interesting for me, like for Atlantic Institute, what we're about is trying to build those bridges, you know, between everybody. So I was thinking, oh, we're on a roll. Did anybody have any thoughts? I think it was so, well, here I'm going to ask and then I'm going to speak. So,
you started off by saying that you moved away from common grounds, and what do you believe now? Isn't that what you said? Maybe I misunderstood you, but right at the beginning you said you moved away from common grounds.
Right. So many years ago, like I was always taught for a relationship, like to build a relationship on common ground.
Right.
And
So
then, right. And so I know like what she's talking about is like the radical form of it. Like, not, she was kind of saying not like the weather or what you might have in common in your life. But I really appreciated her taking on, and from what I wrote down, I was writing down like how you have to try and being comfortable with the uncomfortable, you know. And I think that that's a huge thing. That's a huge thing in life. Like we have to try on and try on different ways of being. And so I think for a while, Winston, I would work on not having things and like not gravitating towards the person that I have something in common with, but gravitating towards somebody that I didn't have anything in common with so that I could learn about them. So that was the way of building relationships that I kind of learned in my early 20s. But I like how, I think for an example, let me just say like last year, I was trying to plan an event talking about how both sides like of the Senate or the State House and stuff like that come together, you know, the left and the right side. And I was trying to, because I do know I've been to the Columbia and I've been to different events down there. Like if you saw in our video in the beginning, you know, we do a Future Leaders Dialogue event. And I know that there are those that they do work across party lines, and they do a really good job of it. But I had a hard time trying to find those that were available to speak that could speak about how they all got along. I think everybody was scared to talk about it, because I think we're kind of taught and trained a lot that everybody is separate. So we don't have that seeing everybody walking across the aisle, and getting that people do come together. And I liked her thought about this is a radical kind of common ground, like coming together for certain purposes and kind of, for the purpose of shared humanity. So I don't know if that answered that, but
I think you did a great job of explaining it here. I mean, lots of times I don't want to dominate this conversation, but lots of times when I go to lots of different intellectual groups and discussion groups, and what I see most people doing is what I call flag raising. They raise an issue and they try to see who all think like them so that they can be friends with them, and people who think against opposite of what they believe so they can avoid those people. And
Right.
it's not so much trying to find common ground or learn about a different perspective. It's more like, can I be friends with because they share my worldview, they're part of my tribe, and who can I avoid because they're not part of my worldview, they're not part of my tribe. And I think what you're talking, Christine, is you went out of your way to find people who think differently so that you can learn from the experience. You can see a different perspective. Am I saying that right? Is that what you're trying?
Yes. That's very good, because I think, like she was saying, sometimes when you are working, that's how those tall silos are created, right? Like when you're in a room of people and you're seeking out those that you are most like, that's like she was saying, the example of her and her father. They can live in two completely different worlds. It's the same world, but they are going to be in completely two different spectrums of it, right? Like he can watch his shows and she can watch her shows, and she's in her corner of social media and he's in his corner of social media. When I was listening to this, I was thinking of Dr. Aaron Simmons. He gave a really good conversation we had with him about how he listens to everything that's the opposite of his belief. And I was like, wow, I get that. That is really cool, because he says, I want to listen to understand. I want to understand where they're coming from. I want to understand their point of view. I want to understand what they are, how they're thinking, so that I can understand how I'm thinking. And I just remember that. And I remember thinking that was really cool. Johnny, I just saw you unmute yourself, so I didn't know if you had something to say.
I didn't want to cut you off. Are you done?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So number one, nice to see you again, Christine. I don't know if you remember, we
Yes.
participated in your tour Faith last year.
Yes.
And so you reminded me, number one, and again, number two, thank you for facilitating this. I think it's very important. And you just reminded me of that famous quote by Abraham Lincoln. I was just in another meeting where this came up, and I got to tell you, it made me uncomfortable. That quote that says, I don't know if it's attributed to him or not, but it's on the internet, so it has to be true, right? It's, I do not like that man. I need to get to know him better. Right. And I'm like, oh, you know what? As I was just hearing Winston say, he goes to a lot of things that are intellectual gatherings, and I can stay neck up all day long. What really struck me about the TED Talk was when she paused and said, I want you to feel that feeling. I want you to feel that discomfort.
Okay. I got goosebumps.
Yeah, because that's the part that is almost precognitive that makes us run away.
Right.
Right. So the only other thing I'll say, and I'm not proselytizing here, but it's relevant because Thich Nhat Hanh just passed away last week.
Yes.
And I'm not in his specific lineage, but the Sangha where I practice is a Zen Buddhist Sangha. And we're constantly enjoined by the sensei there, which I really wish he would stop it because it challenges me so much to get engaged. I mean, Thich Nhat Hanh was known for being the originator of engaged Buddhism, not just intellectually studying it, not just meditating to make yourself feel better or more calm, but engaged in a social way. and the big message was when he died, look at his response to life. I mean, he grew up in the war in Vietnam, seeing the worst of what humanity had to offer, and his response was peace, love, reconciliation. And I don't know what wells to draw on to get to that end, what his legacy is, which is monasteries throughout the world.
Right.
But I know it's not the same feeling as going out for ice cream. It probably starts with a very uncomfortable feeling. So between that major world event and my sensei continuing to say, particularly in Zen, it's not about how much Dharma you can memorize. It's how are you living it in your life? And he very consistently usually makes that comment of, it's easy to wish compassion for the people that are in your camp or your tribe. But, try doing it to the individual who, advocates Fox News or just has a completely antithetical opinion or worldview than you do. But it starts with conversation. I mean, I think that's what separates us from other karma-based life forms, is we communicate, and we can communicate. So again, felt very challenged, not triggered, but felt very challenged and very uncomfortable. And I know that that's kind of the feeling that is coincident with digging up the earth before something can really bloom, right? It's not gonna bloom in something that's well trodden and passive. So again, appreciate the reminder, the challenge. I got to do something with it.
Yeah, I like that she said, step into your courage.
Yeah. Oh, and that was the very first word I wrote in my notes. Courageous. What a courageous TED Talk. An individual. Yeah.
Right. And I think, I remember watching it going, wow, that's that's so inspiring. But she was able to cross those lines, that she was able to figure out, like, the way she was doing it wasn't working for her. And so she was able to make a change, and she was able to cross, and she was able, I think the really neat thing is, and it's neat because at that young age, she was able to see that love, like, was it, and like that shared love, that shared humanity. I used to work in a mentoring program. I used to not work. I was a volunteer for teen moms in a program in Florida, and we did this one retreat with them. And I just totally got that, like, love was like the number one thing in the world. Like, it was just very present for me, that how important it was, and how everything else, I think, kind of revolves around it. So that was just like,
because her work isn't ego-based work. It has to be something greater, so much greater than just herself.
Right.
It's like sales, but with a very, 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 very low success rate. I mean, she didn't speak to it, but I can only imagine how many doors she has slammed in her face and how many side eyes she gets. Like, are you crazy? There's no way. No.
Right. Yes.
But she keeps doing it because what's the alternative? Sitting in our comfort zone. And that's so appealing. That's so desirable. Anyway, it was very inspiring and challenging, which I don't like that mixture, but it seems to be the one that keeps showing up on my plate. So
it's showing up for a reason.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a comment?
Everybody, I just want to chime in. This is my first time sitting in with you guys, so it is a pleasure to see that this group is together and chatting and sharing. And as I listen to the TED Talk, I'm a sociologist. I work at Claflin University. And as I listen to the TED Talk and think in terms of meeting on common grounds, that for me is like the beginning point. It's, that's where once you are on common ground and then you start to take a leap forward, is where you find that discomfort, because the things that you have in common, and we can all begin with our basic humanity. You mentioned love, and we all have a basic humanity about us. If we use that as the core, as the common space for us to engage people who are have a different worldview or have a different set of perspectives, that that opens the door, but that's when the work gets really hard, because sometimes we get there and find the common ground and we sit there and we get too comfortable in that spot. And I think that's where the work really has to begin. We have to take another step and experience the discomfort, because we, the reality that we exist is a constructed reality based on all of the experiences that we have. Our heritage, our experiences, our traditions, all of that create the person that we are. And when I listen to her speak of her worldview and that of her father, and how they can be so divergent at times, they still have that love in common, that humanity, that peace. And so for them to have experienced what they experienced, him going through this ordeal and as a child, as a baby, and her being born in the United States, and a whole different set of perspectives there. Looking at the world, it would almost be like you would see a reversal, her being the conservative and him being the liberal, from the experiences. But it's just so interesting how she presented her story, and how she allowed us to understand the challenge. I think that's the word I'm looking for, the challenge of trying to reach someone who is in a different space, who's in a different mind space, who has a different worldview, who've had a different interpretation even of the experiences that they've had. So this was really, really good.
Yeah, you made me remember, I remember being taught back in my early 20s that sometimes finding the common ground with somebody can be really easy. And then what?
Yes.
And then what? So like learning how to build a relationship without that common ground, based off of question asking and listening, and that's where the work comes in, of being able to function at a whole other level. Because otherwise you have superficial, meaningless, kind of like you can have a lot of superficial relationships and a lot of superficial ways of being. So I recall learning, if you can master not finding it. And sometimes we'd have to role play, and sometimes I knew they were a Buccaneers fan, and I knew and I could probably try to find a relatedness in there. And it was I had to try not to. And it was like a challenge to not find that, so it's an interesting way of putting it. And so I appreciate that, Mary. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have a thought? Go ahead,
Christina, this is Steve Carter in Columbia. I like this very much. This is the second time I've heard her speak. And she certainly does challenges. One of the things, and you've just mentioned something that triggered it for me, is who defines the common ground that we are seeking? If the ruling class decides this is the common ground and we want you to come along, then I think our chances for success are going to be minimal. But how do we engage those who would benefit most from a common ground being reached? And that's bothering me a lot. And I suppose just take the homeless, for example. And we have our share here in Columbia, as I'm sure that the other jurisdictions represented here might do as well. But we're trying to define it in political terms. And I'm not sure that we're trying to reach it through the eyes and the feet and the cold arms of those that we're trying to serve. So I'd be very interested in the group's reaction to who gets to define the common ground. How do we do it? Not between people, different points of view,
right.
The actual ground that we're trying to make common.
That's a really good point too. I'm gonna write that down. I like that. That's really good, interesting. right? Because there is like who's to say which common ground is the common ground that you're going to go with, right? So I like that question.
And if I could just add one thing, I think common ground is different from common prosperity. We tend to think of it as, well, if we make everybody prosperous, then for sure we'll solve homeless or things like that. I think that's different from actually determining the ground that we want to agree on and work towards. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. No, very good question. Very good observations. Cheryl, go ahead. I know you had something to say too.
Yes, I just attended an in-person human trafficking meeting this past Tuesday. It's Human Trafficking Month or something. And when the speaker in the video tonight challenged us to pick an issue, I thought, wow, what would I want to go after? And then I thought, I just went to this meeting. I was in the midst of strangers, but we all had that as our common ground. We did not like human trafficking. So now we can either sit back and say, oh, that was very interesting, I learned some statistics, or we can say, what's the next step? You know, the law enforcement people were right there telling us all the bad stuff. So now how are we going to meet with all those different strangers I was with and put our heads together, because we all did decide that that's a terrible thing. So we have that at least in common, but I know it's going to be different if we stick with it and show that courage to stick with it and work together to see what we can do to help. So it was a nice, I appreciated her challenge, so it'll make me go a little further.
Very good. Good. Anybody have another thought, or go ahead, Dorcas.
All right. My thought, well, I was thinking, there's a difference between common ground and common good. And I was thinking about, when you have common ground, you can still keep your ego. But when you think about the common good, you lose your ego and do what's best for society. And then I was thinking about, for people who choose not to get vaccinated, what they may have common ground, but the common good is what will help society. And the people who choose not to do that are not thinking of society as a whole. They're thinking about themselves. So I think there's a big difference between common ground and common good. And then also this thing about prison reform, just recently they're talking about that there's too many people getting out of jail and they want to put them back in jail. They need to stay in there longer because of, I guess the homeless, they're saying they got out. The man that pushed the Asian lady in front of the train, and then another lady killed in the furniture store. So although they're showing pictures of people getting out of jail, the trend, I think, is to keep people in jail longer. So those are just 2 points that I wanted to bring up.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to thank you, Dorcas, for that distinguishing between the common ground and common good. Martin Luther King Jr. had to contend with those people, as I understand it, who said, come on now, let's find common ground. There's racism and hatred of Black people in the South, but you just gonna have to understand that and meet us halfway. But sometimes the common ground is not halfway between, the common good is not halfway between the two parties involved. And if you're fighting and struggling for the common good, sometimes that you're not just going to be able to partner up with the racist and say, okay, well, we'll just buddy up here. And if you want to change the circumstances, there's a place for fighting, struggling, resisting, protesting. If I understand you correctly.
Yes.
Very good points. Very good points. Yeah, and I know, I can imagine that in Nisha's scenario that there's a lot of work and a lot of conversation, and I know we're not going to figure it out, but we're not going to figure it out tonight. We're not going to figure out, we're just, it's a nice thing to listen and learn and consider and have kind of like some dialogue in here for us to have some, have like the commons area. But I can imagine when you're sitting down with people from two different views of something, trying to figure out, like Stephen was saying, like, who defines the common ground, almost like sitting down in a scenario like, well, which is important for you and which is important for you. Different sides have two completely different levels of importance. And so I'm sure there's a lot of conversation that's got to come together and happen in order for them to figure out what's the starting point that they want to go on. Now, and I know her scenario is related a lot to like the prison system and the laws that they were trying to pass. So I know it worked in her scenario, and I get it can work in a lot of scenarios, and then there's sometimes that it just doesn't work. And I think sometimes we never know which is the way it's gonna go. But anybody else have any thoughts? Doris, go ahead.
Hey, I was on mute. Hey there, this is Doris over in Columbia, and your comment just reminded me of a term I heard about years ago. It was called satisficing. And the basic idea is that everybody gets something of what they want, but they can't have it all. And they come to the table to agree that, okay, I want A, B, C, you want D, E, F, and somehow we'll meet in the middle, and maybe we'll even have to make up our own little alphabet, but we're going to get something in the interest of moving forward. And sometimes I think we have to, our egos always want us to get what we want and have the last word, but sometimes you have to realize that, okay, I got the best that I could at the moment, and maybe later I can go back and address whatever it is I'm interested in doing. So,
right.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of the coming together in the meeting in the middle of things occur sometimes, right? Thank you for that. Do you have anybody else that had a thought?
Yeah, Christina. We've talked a good bit about big issues, and I consider them really, really important. There's also, for me, in my little world, a sort of a microcosmic view, and it has to do with pretty much having members of my extended family on all of the across the whole spectrum, from very, very conservative to very, very liberal, and the fact that I love every single one of them, and I want to keep and I want to keep the relationships. And so it has happened in me to really listen, and I have heard life-giving things from all along the spectrum. And I've found that the more I close myself off, it doesn't hurt the people I might disagree with. It just hurts me. It tightens my heart. But the more I'm willing to allow that they have, that these are good people, and allowing that they are, allowing that that they're doing the best they can. And this is not to excuse people who are actually harming whose ideas are harming, like racists and all. But when you get down to one-on-one, especially I guess if they're in my own family, I want to find what's good in them. I want to believe that there is deep inside each person that I encounter, that there is a good, and that could be, whether I can name it or not, but to believe it's there is a kind of common ground. That's kind of where I'm heading, maybe, that is a kind of common ground. And we have, for me anyway, it's a one-on-one kind of thing. And my thoughts and my judgments are not hurting anybody but myself. And they're hurting. They're out there in our collective unconscious. And so if I can allow that good is there and kind of breathe with them at that place, I hope that that's helpful.
Yeah, I was thinking, for me, sometimes, Anne, it's when I listen to people that I might have a different opinion of something on, I can listen in a way that I can come to understand why they might think what they think or do what they do. So I can understand. So there's a listening to understand versus like a listening to judge or a listening to respond. And I find that brings a lot more peace. But I think that, it's interesting, like, because what you were saying, and I'm thinking the position that I'm always in is I'm like, the in between of everybody here. I'm listening to everybody and understanding everybody, because I'm completely neutral when it comes to all of these things. In a way, that my job is to listen and facilitate conversation. So I don't have a way. I have just a listening. And I was thinking that's kind of like, I have family from all different backgrounds as well. And so I just sit and listen, and I try to get in that other person's space and just kind of come from and understand what they're saying.
I would also like to add to that. Everybody should take on the assumption that I could be wrong. If we can all take on the assumption that I could be wrong, I think we would be open to hearing other people's perspective more. But what happens is, because we are so committed to our perspective, that we sometimes close the door unintentionally, because the other person's perspective is so different that if ours is right, theirs can't be. But if we take on the assumption that I could possibly be wrong, now show me that I am. And then we are open to hearing what the other has to say.
That is really, really helpful, that I could be wrong, and also that I could really learn something from you.
Because holding on to your rightness, like, prevents you from learning. It prevents the the open learning and the dialogue.
But where does the if that's the case, where does the role of courage come from? How can you be courageous if you're always in the middle?
I don't think of it as being in the middle, Dorcas. I think of it as being very, very courageous. Well, it has taken a lot of courage for me to even speak up tonight. It has taken courage to speak to other people in my family who are not willing to listen or accept or be open. I don't think of myself as in the middle.
I'll tell you, in some cases, it is actually courageous to be able to have the ability to befriend, I don't want to say like everyone, but I want to say like to be able to understand, because a lot of times when once you can understand where somebody's coming from, a lot of times then you can reason, so sometimes you have to understand first, and then then you can reason together.
Okay, I don't want to cause any trouble. You can always mute me, but I'm thinking about Derek Chauvin, and I'm thinking about how he killed George Floyd. Okay, now, okay, how much understanding do you all want to give him? Thank you very much. I'm not going to say anything else.
Yes.
I'm trying to be
So, okay, so I will tell you, when Anne was speaking, I was, and I get, befriending everybody, I get where she's coming from, and I was gonna just kind of throw in, except there are certain scenarios where somebody is just toxic.
Yeah,
so
I'd like to address that, actually. Looking at it from a perspective that shows that we live in a nation that has systematically created this racial divide and racial hierarchy that would allow someone to believe that their behavior was okay. See, that's what I look at. If we are, yes, their behaviors was atrocious and very, very wrong. And you would think any rational human being would say they should have known that that was wrong. But we have lived in a society where there has been white supremacy that has been permitted and sanctioned in very positive ways over the centuries, that has created the systemic notion that some people's lives are more valuable than others. And consequently, we can act accordingly. And in the minds of those gentlemen, and I am going to call them gentlemen, in their minds, they were acting responsibly.
I will say, in that scenario too, I think I was really touched at what I saw was the outpouring of many people in this nation very upset over what happened. And I mean, I know some of the sheriff's officers from different groups were holding meetings and just putting out and condemning completely what happened, and I saw people from all different sides coming forward, just completely in shock and completely. So I appreciate, I think then that caused a lot of we need to have more conversation in this arena, and so I think because everybody was just like, whoa, how can anybody think that that was okay? Like how because people can say this doesn't exist anymore. People can try to say certain things don't exist anymore, but when you have it completely put out there and people are watching it and people are like, oh my gosh, like how did we come to this? And then some people, I just thought that there was I think I think that man has no clue how much change and how much he's done to help really expose stuff in what's going on in a lot of the different scenarios, and how people have really risen up to, this is their stand on this and this is their stand on this, and like it's just, it's a shame it had to happen, but I'm like,
but interestingly, in this particular situation, the man who recorded, it had that recording not come to light, the world would not have known. And he presented that not as evidence against himself.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying? Is they were genuinely in belief that they had not done anything wrong. And
Right.
that is what we have to deal with, not the things that people are knowingly committing acts of racism. But when people think that it's okay and acceptable to behave a certain way because that's the way we do it, that is what we have to have more dialogue about, and how we have to really hit these nails on the head, as opposed to kind of brushing around and talking about these gentlemen, these particular men, as bad men. No, we have a nation that has a sore spot, a wound that needs to be dealt with. And it's bigger than that, those individuals. It's bigger than this happened in this community and something similar happened in another community. This is a nation that has evolved with race as a significant factor in how we relate to each other, how we structure the economy, how we structure housing, how we structure schools, every institution within society, how we structure prisons. Every institution in society has been formulated with race in the center. And that's, and because of that, we have become so unconsciously socialized to expect and accept certain kinds of things. And this just brought it to light in, it's to say in living color on, in prime time, everybody was able to observe it and then start thinking about, gee, is this really the America that we live in? And I think it opened the door. And that's why I'm saying we find the common ground. Let's not just sit on it. It's time, we have to go beyond that, because yes, I think, millions of people who never would have thought that that could happen in America saw it happen. So what do we do now? Because it's not an isolated incident. It's not the only time that this has happened. Where do we go from there?
Yeah, and even to add, worldwide, because there were people in other countries that were having huge protests as well. I mean, there was a lot, and I was like, wow, this is, I mean, this is what it's going to take to have us uncover stuff and have everybody really deal with stuff and have everybody really look at how this is it. And I think there's been a lot more focus. There's been a lot more focus in the last, I mean, COVID is probably it might have messed up some of it, or it might have pushed some of it forward, because people were able to meet more frequently over the internet and discuss more things, and discuss things in a safer setting, maybe on the internet versus in person, where people could get more heated, if so to speak. So just to touch on that, anybody else have any other thoughts or anything else that came to them during the discussion and during the video that we watched? I don't want to keep everybody too long. It's 8:20. So I just want to check and see if anybody else has any other thoughts. It's a great thing to leave everybody with is just the thought of how you can apply what we've listened to and what we've discussed in your life. So I think, like Cheryl was saying, she was thinking like the challenge that the speaker had, and she was thinking where she can do something with that. So it'd be, just to think about where you can apply some of what you learned, some of what you heard, share it with somebody else, share the conversation with somebody else. It doesn't hurt to pull some people together and go, hey, let's see if we can make a difference in something. Let's watch this first and see what kind of pointers or ideas we could get. Just in my own little world over winter, like over Thanksgiving time, right before Thanksgiving, Me and another mom in our community here, we put together a coat, COAT, a coat drive for our community. And we gathered like 500 coats. We just saw there was a need for people to, where we live is not, it can be very impoverished. And so we got about 500 coats donated from the community. We had, it didn't cost the work, nothing cost us anything. I will say everything cost nothing. I had boxes donated. I had places willing, the libraries in the 3 little towns here, willing to accept coats and willing to do things. And so sometimes I think it just takes taking a little bit of an idea. And we gave coats out to, we saw people for 2 nights in a row. We had the community center donated the space for us to hold the event. And we gave coats out for 2 nights in a row. We gave almost all the coats out. And it was great to see people come in and come bring their families in, and everybody got to pick out 2 or 3 coats. We told them, some of these moms came in just one coat that they normally wear. And, when we try to say to them, pick out something for when it's light weather, pick out something for when it's colder weather. And they were like, I didn't even think to have more than one. Like I said, yeah, sometimes we put ourselves in the back burner. So, or you might spend money on your kids having a coat, but not for you. And so I just want to encourage everybody to, see a need, do something, even if it's small, even if it's something small, because no matter what, all I thought of when it snowed was, I know that there are some kids out there playing in their coats, and and there are some people that are going to work right now at 4 a.m. in this freezing cold, and they're warm. And because I had an idea and put it into action, so the littlest idea that you might have of coming together, we hosted book clubs last year, or I think, or 2 years ago. I think we did book clubs. We did a lot of book clubs on racial divides. And I probably need to put that down and start doing that again and pick another book. There was another book, actually, Martin Luther King, somebody in the Martin Luther King event we had earlier this month. She wrote her father's memoirs. And I thought that was a pretty good book actually for us to discuss. So I know I need to work on that too. I just want to encourage you all to thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for being here. I say tuning in like I'm like, nobody tunes in anymore. All right. Thank you, Johnny. Thank you for joining us. It was good to see you. On the next 4th Tuesday in February, we will have Steve Morgan, who's here tonight with us. He will be presenting our next video, and he will be hosting the next discussion. And I thought that was actually a very good video. It's actually a discussion dealing with racial issues. So, and I thought, because I watched the video the other day, and it was a very good video and a very good discussion. I enjoyed it. So I look forward to his discussion. And I'm trying to think what else in February that I have. I'm trying to work on something else earlier in February, but I'm not so sure it's falling into place. March, I know we will have a lot of discussion on the Holocaust, on Judaism and the Holocaust. And there is going to be, in Greenville, I think there's going to be a display of a cattle car. So you can actually go get inside it, and there's a whole interactive thing. I do believe we're going to be helping with that as well, which is kind of a very interesting, different point of view to have. And again, if you guys have anything that you would like, Dorcas, like if you would like us to host a conversation or put something together on a specific topic, just let me know and we can work on it. Those of you in Columbia, like, that's what we do for the whole state. We do it throughout the whole state. So we don't mind if you have an idea. And we know Bob, just so you can, Bob Hargraves likes to send me an idea. I send me ideas all the time, and we try to put them into place and get them on the calendar because he's got very good ideas and we appreciate them. So thank you all for being here. Did anybody have a last minute thought? Susan?
I don't know when you did your racial books, if you did Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me. But I just learned today that HBO has made a movie out of it. And I just saw some previews and it looks stunning. But I don't know how you would make a movie out of that book, but I'm real impressed that somebody had the idea.
Wow, cool. I'll have to look that up. Between the World and Me book. I'll tell you both of, I think we did three, I think, discussions. And so those are actually in our library on YouTube here. So you can go to YouTube and you can search Atlantic Institute SC, and you can find those book discussions that we did before.
Okay, thanks.
So
thanks.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everyone.
Thank you all. I appreciate you all tuning in, and hope to see you next month for another discussion. Thank you, Mary, for joining us the first time that you did. I was wondering who was joining us from Claflin, because
Pleasure.
we've done a lot with Claflin in the past, so I appreciate it. All right, thank you very much, Cheryl. And don't forget, you guys, on Saturday we have the event on why we search for our ancestors with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. All right, and thank you very much, Stephen, for your insightful question. I appreciate it. I hope you got a little bit more information out of our conversation to maybe help you with that. But that was a very good point you made. So I appreciate it.